Depending upon what you're trying to do, this can vary quite a bit. It's if you're trying to do a campaign that's targeting existing customers, you may look at one set of data. If you're trying to target the greenfield, you may look at another set of data. But ultimately, it's in my field where we're looking at solutions targeting high performance computing and AI, we're generally looking at users who are more proficient at either, say, data science or computational fluid dynamics or things of that sort. And it also depends on if you're trying to do a competitive takeout or not. So based on all of that stuff, you may use typically you end up using multiple sources of data in order to triangulate that perfect sort of persona that you're trying to target. Customer 360 models are constantly improving. In fact, in the past where, marketers would talk about just having these overall personas, and they'd be quite happy with it. But now in the area of hyper-personalization, I can really use artificial intelligence to create individual personas and then target and go after them in a very focused sort of a way. And we've done quite a bit of that. So that's really enhanced our whole customer 360 model. In addition, we also use, propensity models or buyer propensity or inclination models, as we tend to call them. And this gives us an idea of, when a system or a solution was last purchased, what are some of the things that, the search entities that they've been looking for in the recent years, or some of the ads that they've clicked on. So all of that gives us a bigger view of what the buyer is looking for, and also helps us sort of address some of their needs and the pain point. Now, it goes without saying that AI has really augmented all kinds of data, and we continue to use AI. In some cases, it's still in the nascent areas, but it's really helping us augment all the data that we have. Now, a great example of this is, Einstein, that's found in Salesforce.com, is good for out-of-the-box stuff, where you're trying to do something, not as custom, but it's not necessarily for the experts. In our case, we do tend to use a few more custom models where you can really look at the raw data and produce your own sort of AI models in order to do that customer 360 stuff. So, actually, before we talk about 2021, I'm just briefly going to talk about, what 2020 was like. Again, this was a very challenging year for all companies, firms, enterprises on many levels. But from a sales perspective, what we really had to do was sort of pivot around how do we make it customer centric? Whereas in the past, we could go to conferences and forums and have a one-to-many sort of an interaction and still have that personal feel. It was really hard to do that, especially if it's a new customer, somebody that you haven't had that human bond with. And the way we sort of address that is by doing more webinars, but one-on-one webinars. In a way, due to the fact that nobody was really traveling, it was easier for us to schedule this. But we also had to be cognizant of the fact that people were getting tired, and Zoom fatigue was a real thing, right? So I think going forward, there's going to be a lot of that, especially for the first half of 2021. I do see, webinars still being the predominant way of interacting with customers. Now, hopefully with, the vaccine sort of taking, being more effective and more people adopting it, we do see some face-to-face meetings in the second half of the year. But for now, it is going to be, again, a lot of video conferencing calls, which have just become like the standard nowadays. But, what we've also tried to do is use that as an opportunity to, one, be in more touch with our customers and also listen to them more rather than just trying to do product pitches. At the end of the day, face-to-face is still critical. It's hard to create a bond with somebody, especially like being in the buyer's shoes, if you are, purchasing something that's multi-million dollars. That you have the confidence that you trust this person. Although we've done some really impressive sales over the past year, it's still something that's very human about being able to talk to a person across a table and have that frank, honest discussion. So I hope we get back to that quickly. But again, in the absence of that, I think we've done an amazing job, not just me and Dell Technologies. A lot of the companies have done an amazing job of utilizing some of these technologies as we go forward. So actually, as part of my role, I have to, and I do end up working with a lot of our partners. And if you think like just a traditional, product launch is challenging, well, multiply by that the number of partners that you have, because every one of them may have a slightly different goal in mind when they do a product launch. Obviously, everybody wants to sell more, but your routes to market might be different from one partner to the other, or which market segments you want to target and talk to, might vary, especially if you're working with an early stage company. And I find, again, it's both a challenge as well as a blessing. Is when you work with an early stage company, you get to influence them in positive ways that you've seen that are really going to work with that are really going to work for that partner. But ensuring that everybody gets what they want at the end of the day is challenging. I'm not gonna lie about that, but it's also fulfilling, because when you have a very successful sales campaign that goes and targets customers that you're looking at, and not only do you see the customers benefiting from that, but you also see your partners are very happy and they're just eager to work with you again. So that's been sort of what I feed off of, that energy. Yeah, and there's quite a few of those. So in my mind, go-to-market is not just one activity, but it's actually several, and it's a process, right? It all starts with your product, with your, who are your target personas, who are you going to market with, as I mentioned earlier, like, is there a partner or not? And then there is the whole internal sales enablement aspect of it. You have to train your salespeople, and believe it or not, this is a big part of my challenge at Dell. Is we've got, tens of thousands of sellers all over the world, and they have to sell a lot of products. So not only do I have to make sure that they understand what this new product is, but how can they have that conversation, especially if it's an area that's really complex and they may not have had exposure to in the past. And now, you've also have to do that with your partners as well. And the third aspect, and believe it or not, this is what most people focus on when they think of go-to-market, is the customer evangelization, customer education, and building that interest. So you're doing some demand gen at the end of that. Now, where I think most people make a mistake is that they forget, in order for your salespeople to go after some of these opportunities, you have to prime the pump, so as to say. In other words, you have to generate leads and then feed it to them, especially early on, and then help them in some of those conversations. And that's really what I found works best for us. And those are the, some of the common areas where people tend to overlook. They tend to think of go-to-market as just like, a marketing campaign or a sales campaign on a webinar, and that's it. It's rarely the case in my mind and in my experience, where we end up doing several things in order to be really successful at the end of the day.